In 1974, nearly 2 years after Pong's introduction, everyone had played the game so much that 3/4 of the world's population was suffering from carpal tunnel syndrome. No, not really. But in the arcades, Pong fever was still running hot as ever. People couldn't get enough. So Nolan Bushnell figured he'd give them more by introducing a home version of Pong.
Al Alcorn said, "I believe we can put Pong on a chip." And I said, "Let's do it."
This is actually what's inside the coin-operated Pong video game. There's about 75 integrated circuits on this, and that was all replaced by what's in this.
Atari cut a deal with Sears, and over 150,000 home Pong units flew off the shelves during the 1975 holiday season. Now the established gaming leader, Atari was the place where top programming talent wanted to be.
Steve Jobs showed up unannounced one day, wanted a job. He was unwashed, unkept, smelled bad, had no degree. Al Alcorn's secretary came to him and said, "What do I do?" And Al Alcorn's comment was, "Well, we should either hire him or call the cops." And Al hired him.
Jobs brought along a buddy, Steve Wozniak.
We hired Steve Jobs, and we didn't know that we sort of got Woz along with the package. He was never an official employee of Atari, but hung out with Jobs a lot in the labs. They did Breakout, actually.
There was a line of bricks, and he tried to break the bricks away by knocking the ball against it. It was Pong, only it was Pong turned vertical.
Pretty soon, Jobs and Wozniak broke out of Atari to start their own little business, Apple Computer. Jobs asked his boss to invest in the idea. Bushnell declined. The company's capital was tied up producing home Pong units and developing their next home console concept. They called it...
The VCS, the Video Computer System, was the 2600 and became universally known as the Atari.
The idea behind the 2600 was to get away from having to build a whole new custom chip for every new game. So if we could make the game just be in a cartridge and software, we could release it much faster and much cheaper than we could with a whole new game.
Nolan needed big money to develop and launch the 2600. He got it by selling the company. Warner Communications, headed by Chairman Steve Ross, paid Bushnell $28 million for Atari. Not bad for a $500 investment, plus Nolan would still draw a paycheck as the company chairman. In October of 1977, supported by a handful of games like Street Racer, Indy 500, and Combat, the Atari 2600 hit the streets.
It was a bomb. It did nothing. They didn't get them out in time for Christmas. They didn't sell the ones that were out there. And Warner hit the roof.
The net result of that was they removed Nolan and put in Ray Kassar, who was a person from the East Coast who worked at Burlington Industries and was probably a more professional, big businessman to run Atari.
Nolan was out. But don't cry for this guy. He made even more money with his next business, a chain of family restaurants called Chuck E. Cheese. Now, while all of this was going on at Atari, something even bigger was going on in a galaxy far, far away. In 1977, the movie mega hit Star Wars sent the nation sci-fi crazy. And in less than a year, a new game arrived that cashed in on the craze. Atari's competitor Midway got the arcade upper hand with a Japanese import that went by the name Space Invaders.
We were all fascinated by the Pong machines, and then we were fascinated by Space Invaders, which again was just lines coming down from the screen.
Ultimately, you couldn't win, but it was the first arcade machine to record and display a high score. And that just made people want to play more.
You look at games today that cost literally millions and millions of dollars and take literally 4 or 5 years or more to complete. Most of those games don't rival the gameplay and addictiveness of Space Invaders.
It took Atari nearly a year, but they did strike back with Asteroids, an updated version of Slug Russell's Space War. The object would break up a surrounding storm of falling asteroids and avoid getting blown up by a fleet of flying saucers.
I can remember asteroids like there's no tomorrow, going down there and literally begging my mother for quarters. And then, an hour later I'm back asking for more. It's a good memory for me.
The first ones that I played was basically Space Invaders and Asteroids. I always spent my allowance really fast. It was only like $5 a week. It was like 2 days, and I mean, I was stretching it as far as I could go.
As the 70s disco danced their way into history, 1980 arrived, and true 8-bit color came to the arcade screens. Up until then, any color seen in a game had been achieved by using tinted overlays. Atari was pumping out hits like Missile Command and Battle Zone, which had a custom version built for the American military to use in combat training. One of the biggest hits of the year was Defender from Williams, an Atari rival. This was another Fight the Aliens game, but it was cooler because it had a radar screen that let you see everything that was coming your way. But there was one invader no one saw coming. Check him out. He's got a classic profile. His name? Pac-Man. He was born at a Japanese game company called Namco and brought to the US by Atari's nemesis, Midway. Originally called Puck-Man, Midway was afraid vandals would have too much fun changing the first letter of his name. Small and yellow, he ate everything in his path. Little dots and ghosts with names like Blinky, Pinky, Inky, and Clyde.
I loved Pac-Man. It was just such a simplistic movement with a joystick, and yet it was easy to play, hard to master. And that was really, I think, the secret of it.
It was also the first time a character was the star of a video game. Most important thing about characters, you can license them. Pretty soon, Pac-Man had a song in the top 40 charts, a Saturday morning TV show, and he even made it to the cover of Time magazine. Then, a year later, Ms. Pac-Man showed up on the scene. Same profile, only this time sporting a bow and a beauty spot. There were also more mazes, more ghosts, and even bigger success. Time to head back over to Japan, and a company called Nintendo. They got their start in 1889 manufacturing playing cards. By 1980, under the leadership of Hiroshi Yamauchi, the company was desperate to cash in on the video game craze.
Nintendo was doing modestly well in the Japanese arcade business. They could not get a foot in the US market. In desperation, Yamauchi turned to this guy he had hired named Shigeru Miyamoto.
By Japanese standards, Miyamoto was sort of a wild man. When it came to music, he loved the Beatles and bluegrass. He played the banjo, and he loved designing toys.
And they said, "Can you make a game for us?" And Miyamoto started spouting off about how he'd do this and he'd do that. And then Yamauchi was like, yeah, sure. Just make us a good game.
Miyamoto came up with something that had never been done in gaming. A story to motivate the action. A gorilla runs away from a carpenter and steals the carpenter's girlfriend. Carpenter chases the gorilla through a factory to rescue the girl. Hey, nobody said it was Shakespeare. Literally translated, Miyamoto's Japanese title for the game came out as Stubborn Gorilla. Wanting something sexier, he went to the Japanese English dictionary. For stubborn, he came up with donkey. Gorilla became Kong. Yamauchi called his American headquarters, headed by Minoru Arakawa and Howard Lincoln, and gave everyone the good news on the game.
And he said, Donkey Kong. And, I mean, they almost passed out. They were like, Donkey Kong? What's a Donkey Kong? I think Howard Lincoln's comment was, Donkey Kong, Conky Dong, I mean, come on. But Donkey Kong was a magic game.
Donkey Kong fever swept the arcades, closely followed by Donkey Kong Jr. When it came to merchandising, the monkey was a natural, but it was really the man who became the breakout character. Plans were soon made to give the little guy with the mustache his own game. Everyone knew he had personality, but what he really needed was a name. American Nintendo chief Minoru Arakawa came up with the answer.
Originally, he was Jumpman, and the Nintendo's landlord out here, Mario Segali, pissed off Arakawa, so Arakawa renamed Jumpman Mario after Mario Segali.
And when Mario got his new name, he also got a new job as a plumber, along with a new brother named Luigi. And the Mario brothers jumped into the arcades in a series of games that are still popular today. By 1982, it seemed like the country was having one great big party. Ronald Reagan was in power, the economy was booming, and the gaming industry was taking a big slice of the disposable income. Americans had now spent over 75,000 man-years playing video games and dropped more than 20 billion quarters in the process. It looked like things couldn't get any better. And you know what? They couldn't. The players in the video game industry were about to move up to the next level and face a revolution that would tear the business apart.